Welcome into another post-spring power rankings episode where today we will be heading south to break down the top 8 teams in the Southeastern Conference. This is Always Talking Ball with Tyler Noe and Lance Barton. Do us a favor real quick. Make sure you're subscribed if you're watching on YouTube. Make sure you're following on Apple or Spotify. Check us out on our social media pages on X, Instagram, TikTok at Always Talking Ball. Share the show with your friends and family. I know you guys have a lot of people you talk ball with all summer long. Share the show with them. We'd love to keep expanding, keep growing like we are. You guys did a fantastic job just letting us know where we were wrong and where we were right on the ACC Power Rankings episode. So let's keep that coming for the SEC. And you know what, Lance, I'm just going to go ahead and spoil it. Stay tuned for our next episode. We're ranking the top teams in the other Power 2 conference, the Big Ten. See, this is why people should subscribe and follow. Turn those notifications on so you'll know exactly when that episode drops. Now, there are going to be, this is a disclaimer for all you SEC fans out there who are listening. There's going to be some teams on here that are not on the list. They're in the SEC and they're not going to make this top 8, okay? I don't want to spoil anything, but they're not going to be in the top 8. Our opinion is that these teams we'll mention them later in the episode in the honorable mention section, but those teams would absolutely make the top 4, in our opinion, in the ACC and the Big 12. So for whatever that's worth to you, any consolation prize, if you're in our different conference, that would be great for you. So Lance, let's kick it off, man. Let's get started. Number 1 in the post-spring SEC power rankings, none other than the Texas Longhorns. And every SEC fan groans, but they know it's true, right? The Texas Longhorns have had a great offseason. They had a great past couple seasons making the semifinals of the playoffs. Obviously, the big storyline is Arch Manning taking over, finally getting his shot at, going into the season as starting quarterback. He started a couple games in the past couple years with Quinn Ewers being hurt, but he's got some help. He's got Trey Wisner at running back. He's got Ryan Wingo at the wide receiver at skill positions. I can expect to probably see Khalik Lockett, Jamie French, some of these freshmen that Sark was able to get to come to Austin. They're dynamic players. I think he'll get them on the field as much as he can. Defensive side of the ball, again, they're going to have to replace a lot of defensive linemen, but they did that last year and they did it just fine. But Cole Brevard transferred him from Purdue. One of the lone bright spots for the Boilers last season. He's coming over, but Colin Simmons, Anthony Hill Jr., Trey Moore, they are all back for an absolutely loaded front seven. And then you got Michael Taft, walk-on, turned into All-American, anchoring that secondary for the Longhorns.
Yeah, I mean, really, when you start with Texas, man, it's just that nobody has, I think it was Josh Pate that said this, and he's right, that nobody has been better at the talent acquisition in college football through high school recruiting and the transfer portal than Sark in Texas over the last 2 or 3 years, especially the last 2 years. They're doing an incredible job of recruiting from the high school level. Like you mentioned, some of those 5-star wide receivers. They brought in 2 5-star wide receivers that they brought in, multiple defensive guys that are, including the number 1 overall player in the country in Justice Terry. They brought in from the defensive line in high school recruiting. But they're doing a fantastic job of supplementing that through the transfer portal. They're not building their entire roster through the transfer portal. They're fitting their needs in the transfer portal. And like you mentioned, a couple of years in a row, they've done that on the defensive line. And they needed to. But what's interesting about Texas is when you think about Sark and his offenses, usually in the past, it's more like you think that they're another one that because they score a lot of points, they're high flying and just sling the ball all over the yard. Sark's offense is humming the best when they can run the rock. And last year, going into the season, C.J. Baxter, a former 5-star, one of the top running backs in the country, got hurt right out of the gate. That was a huge loss for the Longhorns. A lot of people talked about that being an issue for them going into the season. And, of course, all they do is step up with Jaden Blue. And you mentioned Q Wisner. Wisner rushed for over 1,000 yards last year. So now having C.J. Baxter back healthy to combine him with Q Wisner in the running game. And also we've seen enough of Arch Manning to see that he's also a threat, a major threat in the run game, especially in the QB power run game. So having that 3-headed monster in the backfield with the ability to be able to run the football and Sark to be able to dial up some plays coming off the play action which is when his offense, again, is working the best. I think this Texas offense is going to be just fine. They're replacing some very solid pass catchers, their top 2 pass catchers, in Matthew Golden, who went first round to the Packers, and Gunnar Helm at tight end. But like Sark does, like I said, they brought in multiple 5-star freshman wide receivers, brought in a couple of transfers, but I do like what they're going to have in Ryan Wingo, who was one of the top receivers in the country coming out of high school last year. And a guy that really came on down the stretch for them last year was DeAndre Moore at receiver. So having him and Ryan Wingo together at receiver, I think the offense is going to be fine. But something that I did not have on my bingo card when Texas hired Sark would be that probably the biggest talking point with Texas is their defense. That is why this Texas team has staying power. They're not the Texas team that was at the beginning of Sark's career and before Sark, where they just came out every year, were highly ranked, and then they underachieved. That's not this Texas team anymore. Back-to-back semifinals appearances. They're the only team in the country that has back-to-back semifinals appearances. And a lot of that is due to the play on both sides of the ball at the line of scrimmage, and especially this defense. Texas last year was top 3 in the country, 3rd in the country in total defense and scoring defense. And they still return a lot of production from that defense. Tyler, would you think that, off the top of your head, in college football, that there's a better combination of inside linebacker and edge rusher than Texas has with Anthony Hill Jr. and Colin Simmons?
No, it's hard. It's hard to come up with someone that beats that.
Exactly. And then you've got on top of that on the other edge, Trey Moore coming back. So defensively, I mean, Pete Kwiatkowski, the defensive coordinator that they brought over, that Sark brought in from Washington when he got there, has, I'm going to say quietly, when people talk about top defensive coordinators in all of college football, he doesn't really get mentioned. And he's now built a track record that warrants him being considered as one of the top defensive coordinators in college football, with the defense that Texas put out 2 years ago, and then having a top 3 defense and total defense and scoring defense last year. I think that he needs to be mentioned as one of the top defensive coordinators overall in college football. So with the added depth in the portal, with what they're bringing back, the overall talent acquisition, and obviously we didn't sit here and, as the kids say, glaze over Arch Manning forever, like I'm sure that most people thought we would, because why not? Everybody's excited about the Arch Manning era at Texas. But it's the overall team in general at Texas that makes them, while we have them power ranked as the number 1 overall team in the SEC right now post-spring ball. And obviously, if Arch Manning lives up to the hype, or even close to the hype, this Texas team will be able to compete at another shot in a national semifinal and a national championship level team. That's how good this Texas team can be.
Yeah, and again, we're basing this all off of returning production, talent acquisition, coaching, really trying hard not to look at schedules, but it's really hard to ignore that August 30th matchup in the Horseshoe against the defending national champions in Ohio State.
It's as good as the season openers we've had in college football, like on paper, like in a long, long time.
I mean, the whole day, the whole weekend is going to be stacked, but that game specifically, yeah. I mean, but what a better chance, Ohio State obviously has a lot of turnover that's happening right now. So what better chance for Texas, because they didn't do it last year, right? I mean, lost to Georgia twice. Everybody knows that their schedule last year was one of the weakest in the SEC. It's going to be that same way this year, even though they got to go to Georgia this year. But
second weakest conference schedule in the SEC last year. Only Mizzou had a weaker schedule.
Yeah, and so, I mean, a couple of years ago when they were in the Big 12, they went to Bama, they beat Bama, but can they do it again? Can they beat Ohio State in the Horseshoe?
Yeah, I mean, Texas, the last 2 years, made a statement early on in the season to let everybody know that they were one of the best teams in the country, by the way, that they went into Tuscaloosa 2 years ago, like you just said, and really just punked Bama in that fourth quarter. Bama had the lead going into the fourth quarter, and Texas took over in the fourth quarter, and then Texas just absolutely shellacked Michigan last year in the Big House. Michigan obviously ended up being down, but still, that defense for Michigan was legit, and Texas made them look like just awful in that game. So can they do something similar to that? Can they go on the road for the 3rd year in a row in a marquee non-conference game and win in the Horseshoe at Ohio State? And I want to say this before we move on. You and I love it that these top tier teams do challenge themselves out of conference. When Texas scheduled these games, it's hard to beat, man, that they're scheduling these games in advance and scheduling like blue blood programs like a Michigan and a home and home. And they're scheduling Ohio State in a home and home. And they're scheduling Alabama in a home and home. Being willing to go on the road and challenge themselves against those types of teams, that's awesome that Texas is doing that, because it's not their fault. It's Greg Sankey's fault and the league office's fault of the SEC that they gift wrap Texas such an SEC like weaker schedule in the conference in the SEC. That's not Texas's fault. But two things can be true before Texas fans are listening to this and getting mad. They can be one of the best teams in the country and be a legit national championship contender, and they also can have a weaker in-conference SEC schedule. Both of those things are true.
Yeah. All right, let's move on because we might need some extra allotted time here because the number 2 post-spring SEC power ranking team is the Alabama Crimson Tide. And that might shock some people, but Alabama has made quite a big jump. It's well documented that they didn't lose a single transfer in the spring portal, which I put them out to Lance is impressive, but I think the more impressive number is last year. Obviously, they lost a ton of guys in spring because of Nick Saban leaving, but they lost 40 overall transfers last year. And obviously, they still lost some guys in December this year, but that number was only 24. So to have, a minus 16, on year to year, that's a huge jump in my mind in the portal era. Obviously, big stories at quarterback where it's an ongoing competition, but it seems to be Ty Simpson is the leader in the clubhouse. Ryan Grubb said, if they played a game tomorrow, he would be the starter. And he's going to have a solid wide receiver core led by Ryan Williams to throw to. You and I both talked, obviously, running back might be, a little bit of a question mark for them, but we both think that Richard Young should be seeing plenty of carries at running back this year alongside Jim Miller. Little worried about the offensive line after, the past couple of years of being told that it's the greatest offensive line known to man. But a little worried about, especially that right side with Wilcom Formby over there. I mean, in the limited time we saw him, wasn't impressive. Obviously, a year, to develop and stuff. I think
he played. He played a little bit at the end of the year last year and was significantly better than he was earlier in the year. What you expect with a young offensive tackle trying to block SEC edge rushers.
Yeah.
But he got better as the year went on last year, and they said that he's looked solid so far this offseason.
Yeah, and I'm going to let you talk about it, but man, like this defense is absolutely loaded. Even though they lost guys like Tim Smith to my Indianapolis Colts, they're loaded. I mean, like you said, like we talked about last night, so loaded that a guy like Jalen Mbakwe is going from the defense to the offense to join that wide receiver core. And obviously, we talked about Ryan Williams, but getting Isaiah Horton over to transfer in. I mean, they got recently a couple tight ends in the spring portal. So they definitely are one of the teams that have made a pretty decent jump from like kind of being in the mid-teens of like these way too early rankings and kind of jumping inside the top 10 in a lot of them.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because, the guys that we respect a lot, Andy and Ari over at On3, Andy Staples released his post-spring top 25 for the entire country here recently, and he talked about that the team that made the biggest jump for him from before the spring ball to post-spring was Alabama. And for a lot of the reasons that you just mentioned, he said that he really did a double take of Alabama's roster, and he was just taken back by how loaded that it truly is, especially on the first string on both sides of the ball. And you asked me about the defense a second ago. Yeah, it is. It's the most talented defense as far as overall returning production that Alabama has had. I know it's a mouthful because they've had some really good ones, but
I think you made the distinction last night when we were talking. Overall, it's the most talented defense, but like you said, they don't have a lot of name guys that are going to probably go in the first round, like kind of top 10 picks like Minka and those guys, but just a solid bunch of ball players.
Yeah, the star power at the top, like a Will Anderson, for example, or a Dallas Turner, or like you mentioned, Minka Fitzpatrick or Pat Surtain. Those guys aren't there, but there are extremely solid like players across the board, like top 3 round type players like LT Overton that coming back off the edge. But so Alabama returns their best defensive linemen across the board, all 4 across the board. They're really too deep. on their defensive line. Quay Russaw was a young guy last year that was Alabama's best edge rusher earlier in the year, and then he ended up getting hurt. He's back from injury. LT Overton ended up being their best defensive lineman last year. He's back as well. He came back. He could have went pro. He came back. And then in the secondary, everybody's back. Literally all of them. Damani Jackson could have went pro. He ended up coming back. Xavier Brown, who was a true freshman last year at the other corner, who made the great play at the very end of the game on the last play of the game against Georgia, knocked the ball down when they tried to throw a touchdown to win the game against Alabama at the end. He started all year last year as a true freshman, was the top corner in the country coming out of high school last year before going into the year. He's back at corner. Your boy, Bray Hubbard, who ended up getting a lot of playing time last year because Keon Sabb, who at the time was Alabama's most productive defensive back in Keon Sabb, he gets hurt. And then in steps Bray Hubbard, who at one point last year you said, dude, is Bray Hubbard the best player on Alabama's defense? Like how productive that he was and just solid as a rock. And now he is one of the team leaders. Keon Sabb's back from injury now. So all four of those guys.
Yeah, they took their licks last year.
They did. Yep. They did. All four of those guys are back, and then they've got about 6 or 7 deep in the secondary that Alabama feels extremely good about that could be starting at any point. Cam Calhoun was a big-time transfer starter at Utah for Kyle Whittingham's Utah squad. They brought him in at corner. So I firmly believe this. I think Alabama has the best secondary in the country going into the season as of right now, post-spring ball.
Yeah, I said it last year too, man. Like, and I'll keep saying it. Last year was your chance to get Alabama, and that first year, that changeover from Saban to DeBoer. Obviously, a lot hinges on the quarterback play, as it does with every single team in the country. So, can they get a quarterback to perform? That's basically the question.
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously. Greg McElroy talked about this publicly here recently. I know a lot of you don't just sit around and listen to Alabama sports talk. That's fine. I understand, obviously. But the most talented thrower of the football on Alabama's team for the last 3 years has been Ty Simpson. Previous 2 years has been Ty Simpson. He just struggled with making mistakes and being able to move on from those mistakes, not winning the locker room from a leadership perspective. A lot of those things have changed. He now has a offensive-minded, QB-friendly type head coach with a really good offensive coordinator in Ryan Grubb. I expect the growth for Simpson to be pretty substantial. But again, you just said it. The defense and all of the playmakers around him on offense are going to be as good as what Alabama's had in a while. The receiver position and the DB position for Alabama is as deep as you could want for a team. It's can Simpson progress and be the answer for Alabama at the quarterback position. If he is, again, Alabama is one of those few teams that we're going to talk about across and through our power rankings in each conference that has a chance to compete at the national championship level again this year.
Yeah,
Alabama has the roster to be able to do that.
I think they're going to want him to make some plays, but honestly, like you said, the defense, the wide receivers, get your playmakers the ball and don't make mistakes. I mean, it's going to be. You don't need to chuck it and have big shots down the field like Milroe had to do last year a lot. I mean, you just, dink and dunk even. Just take care of the ball.
Yep, take care of the football. Let your defense, who's going to be really good. It's every possession, inning, and a kick is what you want, obviously. Don't turn the football over. Don't have the catastrophic turnovers that Milroe had against Oklahoma and against Vandy, those pick sixes or sack fumbles that turn into touchdowns. Those are just catastrophic type turnovers. But you mentioned the offensive line. I mean, the question marks on each side of the ball. The question marks for Alabama is going to be at left guard and right tackle. How do those guys end up meshing with really good, talented players like Caden Proctor at left tackle and Parker Brailsford at center and Jaden Roberts at right guard? All three of those guys are really good, and they're listed by whatever you think of PFF. They had all three of those guys listed at top 10 players at their respective positions going into this year. And on defense, it's inside linebacker. Losing Jahad Campbell, who was so good for Alabama this past year. He goes to the Eagles in the first round. And Deontay Lawson had a nasty knee injury against Oklahoma later in the year last year. Lawson has been one of the top tacklers for Alabama 2 or 3 years in a row. What does he look like coming back health-wise? They're going to need him to be the quarterback of that defense, to be that green dot linebacker that's calling in the plays from Kane Womack, and be the leader of that defense. Hopefully he can be that. They brought in a solid transfer, Nakai Hill-Green from Colorado, middle linebacker. I know initially it's like, I don't know if I want a whole lot of defenders from Colorado coming in. But the previous year, Damani Jackson was the same way. He comes in from USC. USC was flat out cheeks on defense the year before. Damani Jackson was super talented, comes over at corner, was solid as a rock for Bama all year long at his corner position. Nakai Hill-Green was one that started at Michigan back in 2022. Started every game for Michigan back in 2022. He ended up transferring eventually, played at Colorado last year, was Colorado's second leading tackler. So, but still, Alabama's defense, they need Deontay Lawson to be healthy to be what I think they possibly can be on defense. And if they want to get back to competing at a national championship level, they just need Ty Simpson to be solid. They don't need him to be Heisman Trophy Bryce Young. They don't need him to be what Tua was. They just need him to manage the game, don't turn the football over, and let those playmakers that you have in that defense work.
Number 3 in our post-spring SEC power rankings, the Georgia Bulldogs. Kirby Smart-led Georgia Bulldogs coming in at number 3. They got Gunnar Stockton at quarterback. They seem fine with kind of just trading Carson Beck for Gunnar Stockton. I think the drama and some of the off-field stuff with Beck, obviously the injury. I mean, the way Stockton performed in the SEC championship game, I think they seem fine with that. Honestly, we've said kind of Stockton seems like a more typical Kirby quarterback. That
drives an old pickup truck from from a small town in Georgia. The locker room seems to like him more than Lamborghini Carson Beck. Yeah, it just I'm with you on that.
Yeah, he's going to get some help from Nate Frazier at running back, who was really solid last year. They picked up Josh McCray, big bruiser from Illinois, who will be kind of down inside the 10-yard line, being able to punch some balls in there.
Dude, I love Nate Frazier.
Yeah,
the talent, his talent. Like, to be a true freshman and to have what was put on his shoulders because of the injury of ETN last year and just the overall injuries at the tailback position in general. Nate Frazier, coming out of modern day out of California, lived up to the hype last year. Do you expect big things out of him this year in year 2 for him to make a big jump, being the focal point back for Georgia?
Yeah, I think I remember you saying, again, in that week 1 game against Clemson last year, maybe the second week, I mean, you were already raving about Nate Frazier and
I talked about him before the Clemson game.
Yeah.
That the stuff coming out of the spring propaganda and the fall camp propaganda that comes out of places. Georgia's not one of those, man.
Yeah.
Kirby normally will kind of like play it down. You know how he is. He'll act like his team sucks when they're literally preseason number 1 in the country and stuff like. So for him to be raving about Nate Frazier like he was going into the year was pretty substantial. And by the way, they better hope that Nate Frazier is as good as what I think he can be, because Georgia was 102nd in rushing last year. And it's unbelievable to me. They were 102nd in rushing last year. That's got to change this year.
Yeah. They needed wide receiver help bad, so they went into the portal. They got Noah Thomas from Texas A&M. They got Zachariah Branch from USC.
Bring back Dylan Bell.
Yep. They give Branch gives them some speed on the outside, something that we've both said that they've kind of just really lacked the past couple of years, we felt like.
They were mid as hell at receiver last year. I mean, dude, they led the nation in drops.
Yeah.
102nd rushing, and the receivers led the nation in drops. And they still found a way to win the SEC with the toughest schedule in the country.
Yeah. I mean, they got that awesome defense back. That's always reliable. Glenn Schumann-led defense. My thing with the defense, though, is like I just don't think that they've reloaded like in the front like they have in the past. And I don't think, I mean, obviously it's tough to do in the portal era. Like you think back to those 21, 22, those, like how many first rounders do they have on the front 7 and the front 4 even that are now playing for probably the Philadelphia Eagles?
They really are, though.
They just had they just had so many guys that they could just go to. I mean, just shuffle through them. A guy went down. You had another 5-star there to replace. That's what we've said all along is kind of the evening of the playing field in the portal era is like these powerhouses don't have these 5 stars waiting in the wings that they can just punch in when a guy, when their depth gets ravaged. So again, all this being said, still wouldn't shock me to see Georgia win the SEC this year.
Agreed. I mean, again, they 102nd rushing last year, led the nation in drops, had key injuries all over the place at running back, at offensive line. Mykel Williams, who went high in the NFL draft this past year, was injured a lot last year. Warren Brinson, defensive lineman, who was really good for them, was injured a lot last year. They were just shuffling in and out D linemen. I know nobody's feeling sorry for Georgia with the depth that they've got. I'm just saying that they dealt with a lot of things last year. Toughest schedule in the country. And still, they found a way to win the SEC and make it to the college football playoffs and get a bye in the college football playoffs. But I'm with you. I think the biggest difference for this Georgia team going into this year, on paper, it doesn't seem like they have those quote unquote just absolute difference makers that nobody else in college football has along their defensive line. Mykel Williams and Jalen Walker are that capability that they had last year. Again, Williams was just injured a lot last year, but both of those cats went to the NFL. I mean, I love the transfer that they brought in from Army. I mean, he's 6'4", like 245 pounds. He just, honestly, looking at him, he looks like a Georgia edge rusher. So it wouldn't shock me at all to see him end up being solid for them coming off the edge for, Kirby's defense this year. But they're another one. A lot of these elite teams that we're going to talk about, like the bigger, like blue-blooded type programs that we're all used to being the top-tier programs in college football, your Georgias, your Alabamas, your Ohio States, Michigan, for example, Notre Dame. A lot of these big-time programs, Oregon, that are ranked in the top, 10. They're going to be probably on everybody's list for preseason top 10 teams. Almost all of these teams are breaking in newer, inexperienced quarterbacks. I know we saw Stockton at least, that second half against Texas and in the game and in the Sugar Bowl against Notre Dame, but still he's inexperienced for the most part. So what is Gunnar Stockton? That's obviously, can Georgia run the football better? Can Gunnar Stockton just manage the game, get the ball in the hands of the playmakers? And will Georgia's defense, look, I'm not worried about Georgia's defense. I don't think you are either, are you?
Nope.
No. Georgia's defense,
they'll figure it out.
Right. They may not be the number one overall ranked defense in the country this year, but they're going to be somewhere around top 10 in scoring defense.
And they'll have their moments where they kind of look like they did against Georgia Tech, where they just couldn't figure it out. And then they'll have moments where they look like first half against Texas.
Yep. I think that this year's, I think for Kirby Smart, if you got him in an interview really behind closed doors and kind of off the record, I think he'd tell you this is the perfect type of team that he loves the most. One that is out with kind of a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, something to prove, a quarterback that is...
Which is crazy because they won the SEC last year and they got a chip on their shoulder.
Like, I know, man, like it used to drive me crazy too when Georgia would come out ranked number 1 in the country and they would act like that, people said, remember that guy after they won the national championship 2 years ago? When they beat TCU. I can't remember who it was, but they were like, yeah, everybody said we were going to go 7-5. Nobody said you were going to go 7-5.
That was Kirby who said that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But he's really good at somehow playing that disrespected card and getting those kids. Like when they went to Texas last year, that Georgia team acted like just a bunch of sharks and blood-infested waters. And Kirby after the game was like, nobody thought we could win this game.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, a lot of people did think that they weren't going to win that game. But that is the type of stuff that you're dealing with here with this Kirby Smart bunch. Is this team actually will feel slighted because they're going to be preseason ranked. All the stuff that they're going to see, the locker room, bulletin board type material, they're going to be lower ranked than they've been in a long time. We're here having them, in power ranking 3rd in the SEC, and they're going to act like that we just, power rank them 40th or something in the country, which is not the case. But yeah, this is a team that's going to have a chip on their shoulder and is going to have a quarterback that this locker room and this coaching staff has full belief in as far as a leader is concerned, and that they love, that is going to be their trigger man. So wouldn't shock me at all either for Georgia to be sitting there at the end of the year. They're also obviously one of those teams, one of the few teams that I think that has a legit shot to compete at the national championship level and win it all.
Number 4 in our post-spring SEC power rankings, the LSU Tigers. the number one transfer portal class in the country for Brian Kelly. A couple names jump off the page, and we'll get to those in a second, but really just a lot of really solid ball players for BK and the Tigers. You can make an argument on the offensive side of the ball. You can make an argument that Garrett Nussmeier is the best QB in the conference. But man, he's a gunslinger. We talked about it many times last year. Like, he'll make some great throws, he'll make some great plays, and then he'll throw a couple of just really boneheaded interceptions trying to fit balls where he can't fit them.
He's never seen a window that he doesn't think he can't fit the ball through. Like, that's what gunslingers do.
That was, I mean, his decision to forego the NFL draft was huge for LSU. He's going to have Nick Anderson over from OU to throw the ball to. He's going to have Barry and Brown, wide receiver from UK. Kentucky joining Aaron Anderson, Chris Hilton Jr. Those guys are back. So a good wide receiver room there in Baton Rouge.
They're six deep. They're six deep at the receiver position, man.
Yeah.
With really talented receivers. Even a guy like Destin Hill, who transferred in from Florida State, was a very highly ranked recruit, a guy, home run type hitter at the receiver position, could put his face mask on the goalpost at any moment. They are a lot of depth at the receiver position overall. Surprise, surprise, it's LSU. I mean, they're one of those teams that you can mistake for wide receiver youth.
Yeah, and last summer we came out with a bunch of our top list of position groups, and we had LSU number one offensive line in the country, and they didn't always play like it last year. A lot of continuity issues, but they have to replace 4 offensive linemen this year, including top 5 tackle Will Campbell, who went to the Patriots. So that'll be a big question mark for them. Can they do that on the offensive side of the ball? Defensive side, they went to the portal. They got Jack Pyburn from Florida. They got Patrick Payton from Florida State. And then hopefully they get a healthy Whit Weeks back, who halfway through that season last year just seemed to be racking up 15 to 20 tackles a game. And just, I think, second year in Blake Baker's system. I know you're a big Blake Baker guy. Second year in his system for LSU, I think, is going to be a big jump for the Tigers on defense this year.
Yeah, Blake Baker's system is built to, like, I mean, I know all defenses want to get tackles for a loss and things like that, of course, but like, that is, Baker's defenses have always been an attacking style defense to be able to get after the quarterback, get a lot of sacks, and get a lot of tackles for a loss. I just don't know that the overall talent level on that side of the ball last year, because we all know it's been well documented that Brian Kelly's biggest mistake so far at LSU has been on that side of the ball. The coaching staff originally, the talent acquisition originally on that side of the ball just wasn't keeping up with the talent on the offensive side of the ball. And I don't think that's the case anymore. Harold Perkins Jr. is going to be back from injury. We all know how talented he is. His production fell off pretty dramatically after his true freshman year. I think with his ability to be an off the ball linebacker this year, like with Whit Weeks, both of them are coming back from injury, but I expect both of them to be healthy this fall. Having those two guys together, the leadership, the talent, the production that they can bring on the off the ball linebacker, I think is going to be pretty ridiculous. And dude, you hit the nail on the head with one guy. There's a chance if LSU is going to be one of those teams that's competing for an SEC championship and competing in the college football playoffs, which they obviously have the chance to do with the talent that they've got this year. The addition of Patrick Payton as an edge rusher. You're talking about a guy that 2 years ago when Florida State had that undefeated regular season team that got left out of the playoff. They had dudes on both sides of the ball that got drafted in the NFL that was super talented football team. Obviously, they went undefeated that year in the regular season. Patrick Payton was as good as anybody they had on that defensive side of the ball that year and started every single game as an edge rusher for them. His production fell off a little bit last year, but whose production didn't fall off a little bit last year at Florida State?
Yeah.
Him having a new lease on life, a new location, being with a legit contender like LSU, dude, I think that he could be a problem coming off the edge for LSU this year and really, really flourish in Blake Baker's overall system. But LSU is, again, one of those teams. I know we've power ranked them 4th in the SEC, but these big 2 conferences, the Big Ten and the SEC, the top 5 teams in each of these conferences, especially in the SEC, are national championship level type contending teams. LSU is that this year with bringing back Nussmeier at quarterback, one of the elder statesmen. And I think that LSU, this is the best team as a collection of like overall team that Brian Kelly has had in his tenure in Baton Rouge. So let me I got to ask you this question now, with that being a Notre Dame fan and obviously having BK as your head coach of your team for a long time. Is this year 3 for him or year 4 at LSU?
Gosh, year 4.
I believe it's year 4.
Yep.
Yeah. So in year 4, let's just say LSU doesn't make the college football playoff. Do you think that there's a chance that they take a look at making a change in Baton Rouge after this year with the talent that they've got coming back?
Yeah, it depends on who's available. It depends on, and we talked, there was not a lot of P4 coaching moves this past offseason, and this next offseason could produce a lot. He's got to do something there. I mean, he's got
pressure from the fan base will be outrageous if they don't make the playoffs. Obviously,
they expected way more than this by right now.
Yeah, but with as much money as they're paying him, with his track record, like you and I talk about it, but yeah, he's not the most likable guy in the world, but he's one of the best coaches in college football.
I mean, every place he's been in year 3, year 3 in Notre Dame, he went to the national championship game. Like every place, Cincinnati, year 3, like they went undefeated and went to the Sugar Bowl. Like a year 3 was always the jump, and they failed to do it last year. Like he reset after his second year, tried to make changes on the offense or the defensive side of the ball, all that stuff. So yes, with Blake Baker being his second year there, I mean,
agreed.
They've got to make some jumps for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think year 2 with this new defensive staff that he brought in, that was some really good hires across the board. I think is the key to the reason why that this we all know they're going to be. They've been really good offensively since Brian Kelly's been there.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that the defensive play is going to start catching up with the personnel that they're going to have on that side of the ball. I think the defense is going to start catching up more to the offense, and they're just going to be a better overall team on both sides of the ball this year.
Yeah, and we talked about Nussmeier. Think about the conundrum that a team like, maybe the New Orleans Saints might face a year from now. As Nussmeier plays well, Arch Manning plays well. Who do you take if you got the number 1 overall pick? Do you take Arch Manning and take a quarterback for the first time since you took Archie? Or do you take Garrett Nussmeier, whose dad just happens to be the offensive coordinator for the New Orleans Saints?
Yeah. Dude, I'm really high on Nuss. I know that a lot of people are just going to be box score berries and look at interceptions and things like that. And again, he does have some turnover issues. I think some of that also has to do with, too, the pressure that was on that offense the last 2 years to scores almost on every possession in some games because of how poor their defense was. I think has something to do with it. But the arm talent of Nussmeier, dude, his arm talent is as good as anybody in the entire sport in college football. There's throws that he can make that a lot of other people cannot make. His accuracy is pretty flawless, too, on some. And when you really watch him, he's got the chance to be the best in the country. You said that earlier when you first started talking about him. He's got the chance to be the best quarterback in the country. He is a Heisman candidate with the receivers that they're going to have, with the type of offensive system he's going to be running. If he can just cut down on the turnovers, I think this offense has a chance to be a lot better. And I think it also has a chance to be a lot better because finally, I think this running game will finally be a lot better. Since BK has been there, dude, LSU's run game has been borderline non-existent.
Mm-hmm.
But with the emergence of Cade Durham at the end of last year and like the overall depth that they're going to have at the running back position in general, I think it's going to be one of the best in the country. I mean, dude, they brought in the number 1 running back in the country. I'm trying to find his Harlan Berry. Harlan Berry was the number 1 running back in the country coming out of high school. They brought him in as well. So now they've got the last 3 years. LSU has brought in 3 combined top 10 running backs in the country that they're all 3 going to be in that backfield together this year with Cade Durham, Caleb Jackson, and Harlan Berry. So I think the overall run game will help Nussmeier in that passing game a lot as well because they're going to have the chance to be more balanced than they've been the last 3 years.
Number 5 in our post-spring SEC power rankings, the Florida Gators, who could also make a case for the best quarterback in the conference with DJ Lagway, the way he played coming in for Graham Mertz last year. Obviously, their offense took a turn too when he came in, but when Jaden Ball started balling out, started running the rock, playing really well on the offensive side of the ball. They've got 4 returning starters on that offensive line, anchored by Jake Slaughter, who allowed 1 sack, 6 quarterback hurries, and 8 pressures in 728 snaps last year. So they've got all the makings on the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, losing guys like we mentioned to LSU, like Pyburn. But and again, we're not talking about schedule right now. We're just talking about talent, overall talent on the field. This has got to be Billy Napier's best chance to make a run at something.
Yeah, again, from a power ranking perspective, it's if Team A plays Team B on a neutral field tomorrow, who do we think wins that game? We're not looking at schedules. That's the difference in a ranking and a power ranking. So we believe this Florida team with this Florida roster and the multiple recruiting classes that Napier has built down there. I mean, last year at the end of the year, like when Ole Miss went down to the Swamp and lost and got knocked out of the playoffs, a lot of people, the casual fan, would look at just Florida's record and act like that Florida team was just not very good. There are a lot of football teams and coaches that would tell you at the end of that year last year, one of the last teams that they wanted to line up on the field against was a DJ Lagway-led Florida bunch. Like Georgia, before Lagway went down, Florida was on pace to beat Georgia in the cocktail party. And then Lagway went down with that injury. He didn't play on the road at Texas. They got their cheeks clapped in Austin when he didn't play at QB. But down the stretch, when Lagway started, I mean, Florida was one of the toughest outs in college football down the stretch.
Mm-hmm.
But the two-headed monster with him and Jaden Ball, again, quarterback, running back, like tandem in college football this year, you could put them up against anybody in the country going into this season. That's how talented those guys are. But they've really improved their overall like depth at the receiver position and the playmakers that they've got on the outside. They bring back Trey Wilson. They brought in 2 top 10 receivers in college football, led by 5-star Dallas Wilson, that was already in spring ball, making plays that a lot of people at Florida were excited about, your spring propaganda. But an interesting prospect they brought in the transfer portal was UCLA JaMychal Sturdivant, 6'3" receiver. He just obviously didn't have the type of quarterback play and overall offense to be able to flourish in at UCLA, but he still put up solid numbers and was good in his time at UCLA. I think he's going to be really good in this Florida offense with DJ Lagway. I know Lagway had some injury issues this spring that some people are a little worried about. All, signs are leading to that he's going to be fine.
Can't be any more injury concerns than they had with Graham Mertz.
Exactly. I mean, dude, we got still 3 months, 3.5 months or whatever till the season starts. Yeah. Like we've got a long time before the season starts that Lagway has a chance to get healthy. But on defense, they returned most of their production overall. They did lose some guys, but their defense last year was more of a defense by committee. They didn't have those just superstars that were necessarily top tiered first round draft pick type players. They were really more of a defense by committee that were just making plays that got better and better as the year went on. Ron Roberts is not listed as a defensive coordinator. That's Robert Bala, who they brought in from Washington, who used to be on Nick Saban's staff, used to be on your boy Hugh Free's staff at your alma mater too, at Liberty.
Mm-hmm.
But Ron Roberts is really the kind of the mastermind behind that defense. I think anybody would tell you that. I think this defense is going to be solid. The offense, I'm not worried about the offense. I think the offense is going to be really, really good for Florida this year because of the production that they bring back on the line of scrimmage and obviously DJ Lagway and Jaden Ball. That defense needs to take a little bit of a step forward. The improvements they were making down the stretch last year, that needs to continue. If they can continue that, then this Florida team can play with anybody that's on their schedule and can be one of those teams again that's sitting there competing for a chance to get to Atlanta at the end of the year. We don't sit here and talk schedules like you said, but their schedule is obviously brutal. But I'm going to say this to the flip side of that. All the teams that they play, those teams also have to deal with DJ Lagway in Florida going into this year. So it's a big time opportunity for Billy Napier and Florida to really kind of start finally getting over that hump and increase their win total again this year to about an 8 or 9 win football team. That's how good they can be.
Yep, we got 3 spots left here. I know a lot of fan bases out there nervous. Are they going to make one of these last 3 slots? So Number 6 in our post-spring SEC power rankings, the Texas A&M Aggies. Marcel Reed coming back from Mike Elko and company. They got Casey Concepcion, right?
Yep.
Wide receiver from NC State. He was a big transfer portal addition for them. Obviously, them losing Noah Thomas, but offensive side of the ball, the story for them, deepest running back room in the country per Landon Martin.
I'm not saying they're the best running back room in the country. I think that's Penn State, Notre Dame, but deepest. Like they've got four tailbacks that are all really good and have all started games. They just, and a lot of that's due to because multiple people got banged up. But Reuben Owens is back, Le'Veon Moss is back, Amari Daniels is back, and Emmitt Smith's son EJ Smith is back. So those four, that's as deep as any running back room in the country.
Yeah. And then you and I had a pretty spirited discussion yesterday morning. So I need you to sell me on their defense. I know they're losing 3 pretty big game records that, like you said, they always weren't putting up, tons of stats or whatever, but they were always on that scouting report for the opposing offensive coordinator. Hey, let's keep an eye on where these guys are.
Yeah. So Nick Scorton and the Shamar Turner and Shamar Stewart, from a production standpoint, Nick Scorton was incredible, the transfer from Purdue last year. Shamar Turner and Shamar Stewart are the definition of the guys that will jump off the page for you at the Underwear Olympics at the NFL Combine. I mean, they're just monster human beings that look like they were made in the lab to be defensive linemen. Problem is you would watch games and you would ask, has Shamar Turner, has he played today? Has Shamar Stewart, has he played today? And then you'd watch games that you're like, how is that guy not, like when you look up his stat line, you look up his production numbers, like, again, they're really good football players that have a chance to be great NFL players because, again, those you just don't make they don't make a lot of those types of players that are that big, that are that athletic, that have that much talent. But again, their production just wasn't overall there, Shamar Turner and Shamar Stewart. So I think from a production standpoint, I went and looked at it. A&M returns 8 of their top 10 tacklers. So I'm just not that worried that Mike Elko, like, do you respect Mike Elko as one of the best defensive minds in all of college football? Yeah, me too. And I just think that Mike Elko, in year 2 for him, that I'm just not going to be worried about Texas A&M defensively. Like, he's earned my respect enough, like some of these other coaches that we talk about, that going into the year, I'm just not worried about a Mike Elko coach team and their defense. I do think that what they're bringing back with the production that they are going to be bringing back, I like it a lot. And I like the fact that they added TJ Searcy, was an edge rusher from Florida who was one of Florida's best defensive players last year and arguably Iowa State's best defensive lineman. And I'm probably going to butcher the name, but Tyler Aneedham, that they brought in from Iowa State defensive lineman, and Julian Humphrey, who was one of the surprise defensive back transfers leading into the SEC championship game against Texas. All of a sudden in the December transfer portal, Julian Humphrey, who's starting at Georgia at the time, enters the portal.
Yeah.
And so they added him a defensive back. So, like, I just think the defense overall is going to be fine under Mike Elko. I'm more excited about the jump, that the potential that this offense can make this year. Did you see our boy Jake Crane on Crane and Company, his top 10 quarterback list yesterday?
Yeah.
He's the only person I've seen that had this on top QB's lists, and that's Marcel Reed. He had him on his top 10 list. I mean, I wouldn't have him on my list, but like, I don't hate it with the potential that he has this year. Marcel Reed does not get mentioned among any of these QBs going into this year in the SEC as a potential, like, really, really good quarterback. But year 2 in Colin Klein's system, dude was a true freshman last year playing SEC football. That's tough to do, man, to be really good as a true freshman. And if he can progress in the passing game, nobody's doubting his running ability. But obviously in Colin Klein's offense, what is one of the things that he likes from the quarterback position, Tyler?
He wants to run the ball.
He wants to run the football. So with the stable of tailbacks, with Reed's dual threat ability at the quarterback position, and now with the playmakers that he's got on the outside, with Casey Concepcion, like you said, Mario Craver was a transfer they brought in from Mississippi State, who's extremely explosive, and a guy that everybody was excited about last year going into the year, the 5-star, number 1 overall listed athlete in the country, in Terry Bussey. We were wondering where that guy was going to end up playing. Looks like he settled in at the wide receiver position. So you take those 3 guys that I just mentioned, those 3 receivers, Marcel Reed, and those stable of tailbacks. As far as like overall just speed and explosiveness, they're going to have multiple guys, like 4 or 5 guys on the field at one time that can all stick their nose on the goalpost if they get their hands on the ball, if they get a little bit of a crease. That's the type of explosive, like the weapons that they're going to have offensively this year. For me, it's really what can the offensive line do? They got better last year on the offensive line. They were a little bit better, but that position group in general needs to improve. For them to compete against like Texas, for example, in that game they played to Texas last year, that Texas defense just completely shut down Texas A&M's offense, and they just couldn't move the ball. For Texas A&M to compete with the top teams in the country, like your Georgias, your Texas, your Ohio States, those types of teams, to be can they win multiple games in the college football playoff? Can they compete for an SEC championship? That offensive line needs to get better. So I'm excited to see what that bunch can look like this year, because I do think they've got the playmakers on offense, and I do think Mike Elko's defense will be solid. So that's probably why we didn't have Texas A&M maybe as high as some of these other teams, but still being sixth.
We still have them higher than a lot. I mean, I haven't even seen them in the top 25 in a lot of these way too early rankings,
which to me is egregious. I think that's egregious. I actually heard Greg McElroy talking the other day, and he was saying that one of the teams that needs to be talked about more this offseason is Texas A&M. It's almost like, they lost in that game against Texas last year, and the way that they looked in that game.
And everybody saw them against South Carolina too.
Exactly. Yeah. But like down the stretch, the last couple of games of the year, they didn't look as good.
Yeah.
But people forget, going into that Texas game, if they would have won that game, weren't they poised to be playing in the SEC championship game if they would have won that game?
Yep.
So they were one game away, last game of the year, for actually playing in an SEC championship game.
Yeah.
And they bring a lot of production back and added some nice pieces on top of it. So, I mean, if you're an Aggie fan, you got to be excited about this year and year 2 in the Mike Elko era.
Number 7 in our post-spring SEC power rankings, the Auburn Tigers and Hugh Freeze. Some people probably think this is a little high for them. I don't know. It failed to live up to the hype, I guess. This is probably the realistic expectations for them the past couple of years. And Hugh Freeze's first 2 years with kind of the talent that they had, the talent that they had to replace. I mean, just kind of everything that went on before Freeze got there didn't give him much to work with in the first couple of years. But Jackson Arnold transfers over from Oklahoma. They got a solid wide receiver room. Cam Coleman, Eric Singleton from Georgia Tech. They got Perry Thompson, Malcolm Simmons.
Top 5 receiver room in college football. This season will be coming out here soon. That will probably shock a lot of people. But when you look at the production from Cam Coleman and Malcolm Simmons and Singleton from Georgia Tech, Auburn's got a top 5 receiver room in college football.
Yeah. And they went to the transfer portal to get some help on the offensive line. Mason Murphy from USC, Xavier Chaplin from Virginia Tech. So trying to beef up that offensive line. But I love this defense. I've seen a lot of early 2026 mock drafts have Keldrick Falk, defensive lineman for Auburn, anywhere from the top 5 to the top 10. They got linebacker DeMarcus Riddick, who was known mostly last year for running his mouth and talking a little before the Alabama game, but
he was still productive for the year.
Yeah.
That's what he got most of the publicity from at the end of the year.
Exactly. Champ Anthony in the secondary. So all 3 levels of the defense, they've got playmakers.
Yeah, so let's dig into this Auburn team. Tyler, do you think that probably most people will be shocked? Because obviously by some of these videos that we're posting on social media, a lot of people look at teams going into this year and they try to use results from the previous year and things that happened in the previous year, acting like that should directly correlate to what a team's going to be the following year.
Yeah.
And that's just not the case.
Especially in this era we're in.
Exactly. The way these
returning production I think I saw a graphic earlier in 2021, overall returning production was around 75%. And now it's like hovering just over 50%. So
exactly,
year completely different programs in some cases.
Yep. So I think that most people will just look at Auburn's like their record that they had last year, and that's it. The casual will look and say, oh, they went this way, whatever, and then so they can't be good this year. No way. They were one of the few teams in college football. I remember when this graphic got released, Tyler, at the end of the year. Auburn was one of the few teams in college football that was ranked top 30 in total offense and total defense last year at the end of the season. The other teams were teams like your Ohio States and Oregons and your Notre Dames and teams that were like Penn State's, teams that were sitting there in the Texas, that were in the Final Four and in the quarterfinals of the college football playoffs. And there's Auburn with a losing record. Why was that? They were 105th in the country last year in turnovers lost. They lost 22 turnovers last year. That is why.
Yeah.
That when you're top 30 offensively and defensively combined, that you end up with a losing record and not going to a bowl game. But dude, this 2 years in a row that Freeze has stacked top 7 recruiting classes. They went heavier in the transfer portal this past year. Again, not just the amount of players that they brought in, it's the quality of players that they brought in, like a Singleton from Georgia Tech at wide receiver. But he was the number 1 wide receiver in the transfer portal that ended up going to Auburn. So I just think, man, that this is the year that your boy down there, old brother Hugh, that win total needs to go up. They need to be a 8-4, 9-3 or better type team. And again, I know we're not power ranking teams based off schedules, but their schedule actually does set up pretty nice from an SEC standpoint this year. They have to play Alabama and Georgia, but they get them both in that snake pick there in Jordan-Hare. And then after that, I mean, really, like the schedule in the SEC is very gettable for them. Obviously, they got a huge game right out of the gate at Baylor. I've already talked to a couple of Auburn friends of mine. They're almost acting like, oh yeah, we'll go Baylor, go beat Baylor. Dude, Baylor's a solid football team with a really good quarterback.
Yeah.
But overall, man, I just think this Auburn team with the receiver position that they've got, you think of Hugh Freeze's teams at Ole Miss, they were the most successful. He had solid quarterback play and elite wide receiver play, and his defenses were solid when he was there. That's what this team has the chance to be. And just like a lot of these other teams, man, that's going to be breaking in a new quarterback for their team, it all is going to depend on, can Jackson Arnold just play solid?
He's still got 5-star talent.
He does, 100%. And Freeze, with the type of offense that he runs, that RPO system, it predicates on the running back and not the running, but the quarterback being able to move his feet, being able to make some plays with his legs. Arnold absolutely can do that. It's just they've got to cut down on the turnovers and can't have the back-breaking type plays that they had last year. That turnover margin differential can't be what it was last year. If Jackson Arnold can cut down on the turnovers and just be solid, this Auburn team has a chance to be like a 9-win football team this year.
Number 8 in our post-spring SEC power rankings, the Oklahoma Sooners. Obviously, John Mateer is the headliner, transfer quarterback from Washington State, who he can sling it. I mean, I know last year he did it against lesser competitions, but recently we've seen Washington State quarterbacks who transferred to bigger schools turned out pretty well. And getting his offensive coordinator, Ben Arbuckle, to come with him too.
Superstar.
That's very important for his continuity. He's going to obviously have to get used to his wide receivers. It helps that he's got Deion Burks coming back. If you remember that wide receiver room for Oklahoma last year, just completely ravaged with injuries. At one point, they were missing 5, like their top 5 wide receivers.
Top 5.
Burks was one of those. A lot of the guys transferred out or went pro, but Deion Burks is back to anchor that. Jaden Ott, running back from Cal, they just landed a couple weeks ago in the spring transfer portal. Probably the biggest get of anybody in the spring transfer portal, you could argue, for a team that really needed running back help. That running back room has struggled for the past couple of years. Defense is solid. They got Peyton Bowen back. They got Eli Bowen, Dominic Williams, who transferred in from TCU last year we talked about. He's coming back. And then they added Marvin Jones Jr., who spent some time at Florida State and Georgia. And again, it's another 5-star talent who is yet to realize his full potential. But on the defensive side of the ball, it's kind of like Elko. Like, typically, you're not going to worry about an Oklahoma defense as long as Brent Venables is running it. And he is running the defense this year. Like, he's calling the plays. There's no defense coordinator. So he's doing double duty there, head coach, DC. We'll see how it turns out for the Sooners. But, same with Florida. We're not talking about the schedule. It's a tougher schedule than most teams have.
Yeah,
But
I think most services have them at the number one
yeah,
ranked strength of schedule. But again, this is a power ranking. Team
yeah,
A plays Team B neutral field. We think Oklahoma would beat a lot of teams across college football on a neutral field.
yeah. Texas fans will love the fact that they have an easier schedule, and Oklahoma fans have a tougher schedule.
Yeah, exactly. So with Oklahoma, I think where we got to start is that I think that Oklahoma can say, as far as quarterback, offensive play caller, and defensive play caller, that trio, which is very important, obviously, in any level of football. But quarterback, offensive play caller, defensive play caller, Oklahoma has one of the best trios in the country at that. With Brent Venables now calling the defense, he's one of the best defensive coordinators of mine in your lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
At his time at Clemson and Oklahoma, before he became the head coach at Oklahoma. Ben Arbuckle, the overall resume that he's built before coming to Oklahoma is extremely impressive. Obviously, what he did with Cam Ward at Wazoo and what he did with Mateer last year at Washington State. And Mateer, dude, a lot of these top quarterbacks lists that we've seen from people like Greg McElroy, people that we've seen like our boy Jake Crane, I mean, they've got John Mateer listed as the top quarterback in the country or the number 2 quarterback in the country in all of college football this year. That's the type of talent that this guy has. I think he absolutely is one of the top 5 quarterbacks in college football going into this season as far as returning production is concerned. I would think that, I'm curious if you agree with me, I just really need to see it against the type of competition he's going to be playing against now. But getting Jaden Knott and pairing him up with Javante Barnes, that is a much needed get, like you said, with Jaden Knott at the tailback position. With a defensive-minded head coach, you know that he wants to be able to run the football when they need to be able to control the clock, give his defense a little bit of a break to let his defense work. I know they lost some solid production defensively, but overall they returned a ton on defense. Like, I'm not worried. You said it. They're absolutely one of those teams, as long as Brent Venables is calling that defense like he is this year. I'm not worried about Oklahoma from a defensive standpoint.
Yeah.
I'm just not. If Ben Arbuckle can be what we all think he can be, and if John Mateer can live up to the hype, they absolutely can make some serious noise in the SEC this year. Oklahoma is the team that has jumped up the most for me from pre-spring ball to post-spring ball. The spring propaganda that is coming out of Oklahoma about John Mateer is they flat out did not miss with that kid. That he is as good as advertised. He's a leader. That team is already talking about possibly naming him like a team captain or something. He's one of the team leaders already in the locker room. And if you haven't watched him play, I seriously task you to go watch some highlights of John Mateer. Obviously, he can throw the football and all that kind of stuff, but dude, he is as hard-nosed and tough as a runner as you're going to see from the quarterback position. Dude is not scared to stick his nose in there and take on anybody from running the football. So the couple tailbacks that they've got in him running the football, I just think overall that Oklahoma is going to be much better on both sides of the ball combined as a team this year than they have been the past couple of years.
Lance, very, very quickly, honorable mentions. Obviously, we talked about at the beginning, some teams not making this list, who would be top 4 in the ACC, the Big 12, conferences like that. Tennessee, who probably would have cracked the top 8 before the Nico drama. A team like Ole Miss, who was talented as anybody last year. And then probably most notably that was South Carolina, which everybody has had them easily top 25, top 15 in the country. So real quickly,
I believe we'll be one of the few that will not have South Carolina in like our top 8 power ranked teams in the SEC going into the season. And it's not that like we don't like this South Carolina team. You and I talked about this. What separates team probably about 5 or 6 to team 10 in the Southeastern Conference is on an overall record is like one game. You're talking about like South Carolina, we may have them as the 9th ranked power ranked team in the SEC going into the season, and that's an 8-4 football team, possibly 9-3. They may go 5-3 in SEC play and win all their non-conference games. That's what we're talking about here. We're not saying that Texas A&M is light years better than South Carolina. Like, there could literally be one game that separates those two teams on the win-loss column. But obviously with Lenore Sellers coming back, like, my thing with South Carolina is they've got to replace a ton of production on defense. And do I think that South Carolina, from a recruiting standpoint, has just earned the respect to be able to just say, well, they've just reloaded on defense, like a Georgia, for example, or like we talked about with Texas earlier, or an Ohio State? No, I don't. But do I think they have the chance to still be really good on defense? Yes. But the X factor with them is Lenore Sellers has a chance to be as good of a quarterback to be able to lead a team to Atlanta, to an SEC championship. If he ends up being a superstar like everybody thinks he can be, South Carolina will make us look foolish and be one of the top teams in the SEC, and that's fine. The South Carolina fans can come for us on that. Tennessee, it's just, we don't know what to expect at the all-important quarterback position.
Yep.
We think Joey Aguilar can be good. McIntyre, the redshirt freshman, can be, or the two freshmen that they've got, redshirt freshman and true freshman, that they can be really good for Tennessee. We respect Josh Heupel a lot. We just need to be able to see where they're going to be like at the quarterback position. And then obviously Ole Miss, again, the amount of production that they're having to replace on both sides of the ball is among probably the most in the entire country. When you think about Jordan Watkins at receiver and Trey Harris at receiver and obviously Jackson Dart. I know they're excited about Austin Simmons at quarterback. I am too. I think he can be legit. Obviously, any quarterback in Lane Kiffin's system can be really good. But the defense last year is the reason that Ole Miss was so much better last year than they've been in years past overall as a team. And the amount of production that they're having to replace on defense is pretty dramatic. So, again, they could be a team that makes us – all three of those teams that we just named could be teams that can make us look foolish at the end of the year and end up jumping into the top 5 in the SEC. But as of right now, as we sit here in April doing a post-spring power ranking, I think that the 8 teams that we've got would beat those teams on a neutral field if those teams played tomorrow.
We appreciate you guys tuning in. We knew this one would go a little longer than the ACC one because, as always, it just means a little more. So appreciate you guys sticking it out with us. We'll obviously break out these videos on YouTube team by team, so you can go and check those out if you want to. And like I said, stay tuned next time. We're going to be breaking down the top 8 teams in the Big Ten. So appreciate you guys tuning in.